time for another Pac-12 update, this time looking at the failed media deal and if the Pac-2 can really get into the college football playoff.
College football is in full swing, and we're back on the Big Mountain, where we bring you a detailed focus on the Big Ten and the Mountain West with a special perspective on college football realignment and expansion. What do you got, JY?
Hey, well, it's good to see you all again. It's been a little bit since we've done a expansion and realignment video. We've got one here specifically to the Pac-12 and eventually to the Pac-2.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen us before, my name's JY. This is my good friend Steve. We've been doing these Pac-12 expansion updates or realignment updates for the past almost 2 months here. If you're interested in some of what we're doing, take a look at our channel. We've got probably about 8 Pac-12 updates at this point, and Steve's also done some with the Big Ten, some information on the ACC. Yeah. So take a look at our channel if you're looking for more of that stuff. But in this episode, I want to dive into the failed media deal. We really haven't talked a lot of detail about this in the past. This isn't new news, so if you're hoping for like breaking news or anything like that, we don't have breaking news, although we do want to get into the Pac-2's chances of actually being in the college football playoffs here in the future of 24 and 25. But before we get into that, I do want to break down kind of what went on with the media deal. I found some information here that was printed about a month ago, maybe a little less, and I found it really interesting. It kind of helps just kind of unravel the history of the Pac-12 over the past year or so and why they are where they are at this point. So again, a lot of this we really haven't talked about, maybe at a very high level, but not into any sort of details. So I'll start back a little. It's all historical, but it'll lay some groundwork in terms of where some of these presidents were at, and really kind of that board versus commissioner that you've heard so much about, and everybody loves to blame the commissioner. And let me just state, everything I'm going to say right here is to not focus blame away from the commissioner. Plenty of blame to be had there, but I think there's also blame to be had on the president's side and the board member side, which is frankly the president. So
when a 100-year-old conference totally implodes, there's plenty of blame to go around.
Exactly. So let's go back over this here a little bit. So ESPN offered a $30 million per school media rights deal back last fall. They didn't want to have it go out to public in terms of bidding, anything like that. They kind of want to do an early negotiation, no competition. Let's just get it done. This is ESPN. Let's just get it done and move on. One Pac-12 president said nobody was up for that. Like none of the board members were up for this $30 million early deal, so to speak.
Which is kind of a similar deal to what ESPN has with the ACC.
Yes, right. And they weren't up for it mainly because this is also the same time that the Big Ten deal that was potentially going to be worth 70, 80, upwards of maybe $100 million. Those were the early rumors or press releases on that. So they're going, wow, look at what the Big Ten's getting. You know, just based on that, not based on valuations, but based on that, we think we should go for more.
So they don't fall even further behind where they already are.
Exactly. So again, trying to paint the picture of here where things were at back at that time. Once the real numbers then came out for the Big Ten deal, and they were released at about 63 million-ish early on, there was just a crash. Everything just kind of imploded from that point on. After the Pac-12 countered then with 50 million, and this has been made public now. That's again not really new news, but the counter from the Pac-12 was 50 million. ESPN straight just walked away. And we talked about that in one of our past episodes. If you've seen us, we did kind of go over that briefly. But ESPN, there was no counter. There was no negotiation. They just left the table at that point.
And it's important to point out that during that time, and since then, ESPN has been, cutting costs. They had already signed that big deal with the SEC.
Right.
And they've been cutting costs in other areas. So it made sense that they would walk away.
Yeah, good point. So there were rumors that were swirling that this $50 million offer was really being shaped heavily or pushed heavily by one president within the Pac-12. The president consulted with one of their university's professors and kind of came up with what they thought the valuation would be of the Pac-12. So who is this? A lot of people want to say, it was probably USC, who at this point was gone. So just as a reminder, as we're talking about this, USC and UCLA are gone. They're out of this at this point. This is the Pac-10 that we're talking about as this was going on.
Right.
So I think I should have pointed that early on. USC and UCLA are out of this picture.
Right.
This is the Pac-12 at this point. So
without their biggest market.
So you're probably thinking, okay, who are the next biggest schools? The next biggest. You think the Ducks. You think the Huskies. Apparently, this person was Taylor Randall, the president of Utah. Was the one that was pushing this.
Yeah.
So let's get into a little bit of the detail and what really happened in terms of this failure of negotiations. Reports state that many of the presidents, not just this Randall, wanted an aggressive deal. They really wanted to push the envelope with that. Again, it's coming off the rumors of the Big Ten deal that was out there. Many schools retained their own consultants to value the league. And because of that, it resulted in a wide range of values. Now, I don't know what that means, but I would guess anywhere from probably $30 million to the $50 million mark. And maybe even slightly below 30. I don't know. But I think a fair guess would be 30 to 50 million. It was stated that the $50 million value was higher than any of the valuations. So I'm using that as the high mark because that's what they countered with. But it also has come out that there's no valuations from any school that said the Pac-12 was worth $50 million.
Yeah.
But with that was supposed to be the starting point to get to a true value. So again, in a negotiation, we talked about this a few episodes ago. You've got one side over here and you get one side over there, and of course you're gonna kind of shoot for the moon, so to speak, and you end up somewhere in the middle. So shooting for the moon for the Pac-12 was this $50 million mark.
So our viewers are clear. So you're saying that ESPN originally offered $30 million.
Correct.
First counter offer from the Pac-12 was $50 million.
Right.
So there's about a $20 million gap there.
Correct.
And we're talking about per school payouts.
Correct.
Not conference.
Yes, correct. Yes. The presidents actually did want to take this to market, again, for further a market valuation, if you will, not just one, not just ESPN saying what they think the market is, or not just the consultants of these schools saying, let's take it to market and see what happens here.
Right.
Again, on the heels of the Big Ten number. And they didn't want to cut a deal early. Again, this is coming from the presidents. And I read that as saying they're telling the commissioner that they don't want to cut a deal early, and B, they want to take it to market, and C, we want to start way over here at the $50 million mark. All of that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
And the commissioner may have been 100% on board with all of that.
Right.
But that was coming from the presidents. Obviously, hindsight being what it is right now. and clearly at that time, a thought of an implosion of the Pac-12 when they were doing all of this. Again, we want to take it to market. We're not doing an early deal. We're going to over-exaggerate, if you will, our value.
Yeah.
At that time made sense. Shortly thereafter, things changed dramatically and very quickly.
Yeah.
So hindsight is always very clear.
The bubble burst.
The bubble burst big time, but you kind of understand why they were where they were. And again, coming off of where the market was at that time.
Sure.
And again, the presidents instructed the commissioner, Commissioner K, we try not to say his name because we'll botch it, Kliavkov, something like that, and Sports Media Advisors, which was the consulting firm that was hired by the Pac-12, so they were really working on this together, to start negotiation with this at $50 million. This wasn't supposed to be an all or nothing thing. It wasn't, hey, we want 50 or we're out of here. Again, it was supposed to be a negotiation starting at 50. But as you know, if you take a counter to somebody that, hey, they made their best effort, they gave it to you, any sort of counter, they could easily walk away. Absolutely. It could have been 31, and ESPN were like, nope, we're done.
Right.
We're out of here.
Yep.
Rumors then are that Commissioner K, closed the negotiation circle very tightly, and the presidents just relied on his updates. Yes. So there was no presidents within this circle. It was a very small group. Obviously, it was him, the consultants, the sports media advisor, and they say a few others, probably within, I would assume, within the Pac-12 offices, some legal people or whatever, but no presidents. Presidents did not know exactly what was happening during the negotiations, and Randall inquired about being the lone president on what they would call the deal team, but his request was denied. Now, was it denied because Commissioner K didn't want any presidents there? Was it denied because there was already some backdoor backstabbings, if you will, going on? We have no idea. No idea.
None of them trusting each other, so they
Exactly.
wanted one person.
So why? Yes, exactly. So again, hindsight being what it is, I would lean towards they probably just didn't trust each other.
Yeah.
Or some didn't care enough to trust anybody.
Sure.
They just let the commissioner do his job, quite frankly, right? And we're going to get into that here in a minute, too. So what about the actual valuation? Let's talk about that. Initially, again, everyone was using the inflated Big Ten valuation from the very original kind of reporting on that. Fox has reportedly said that they viewed the value of the 10 Pac-12, the 10-team Pac-12, to be at approximately $300 million. Wow, that's $30 million a school.
Yep.
And this is Fox.
Yep.
So very interesting how that kind of works out. Very, very similar exactly to what ESPN offered.
Right.
However, the valuation that the 10 schools focused on was more in the 40 to 45. Again, even though they were out at the 50 as their counter, they were more focused on a $40 to $45 million per school range.
So they were more on the hopeful side of the valuation.
More on the hopeful side of the value. Of course they would be.
Yeah.
But yes, more on the hopeful side. Also, there's news that the Pac-12 wanted UCLA to come back. Rumors are that a $50 million per school amount is a number that would possibly make the Bruins contemplate a reversal.
And we talked about this before. During that time period, there were serious questions whether the state government in California was going to let UCLA leave. That was up in the air for a long time.
Yes. So kind of a combination of things. Again, none of this is very straightforward. There's tons of twists and turns and tangles, but a good point to bring into that. Clearly, the Pac-12 was thinking probably through that and just kind of pulling strings back at them. If we can get a certain number, we might get the Bruins to reverse, get them back
Which
here.
could get them back in that the
Southern
California
LA market. Yeah. The Bruins, of course, and we've talked about this before, but the Bruins would also then increase the value of the conference, and they said about 10 to 15%. I know you said before, you heard from somewhere that it was about a 40% market share for USC and UC, that LA market in terms of the Pac-12. It was like 40% of their market value.
Of their market value. Now, that doesn't mean the brand value of the schools, but
right.
the LA
Just
market,
that
40% of the market value.
Right. So here they're saying, it would probably increase the conference value, so not apples to apples, but talking kind of the same thing, by 10 to 15%, which then presented a potential argument for unequal revenue sharing.
Yep.
Well, of course, if you go down the unequal revenue sharing route to get the Bruins back, you better be darn sure that the Ducks and the Huskies and maybe the Utes, I don't know, but definitely Washington and Oregon are going to say, hey, if you're giving them 50 mil, you better be giving us 50 mil.
And if they say that, Colorado's going to say, well, we're leading the ratings. We got this new coach and everybody.
It becomes just a complete cluster, right? So anyway, obviously we know that didn't go anywhere, but rumors are that was part of the discussions. No one truly believed the PAC was worth 50 mil. And I saw this reported several places. Like, nobody actually believed 50 mil was a real solid valuation number.
Yeah.
It was a negotiation number.
Sure.
The University of Washington president stated that she didn't think, again, many of the presidents thought this was realistic. Right. Literally stated by the University of Washington president. Apparently, Randall and a few others were pushing for the $50 million, and the others just went along with it. Other presidents, as usually would be the case. You have a board of, at this point, 10, I guess. You've got some people very invested in this, understand it really well, wanting to be involved in it, maybe 3 or 4. You've got 3 or 4 that are along for the ride. They either trust the commissioner or trust some of the other presidents that are involved, and maybe 2 that just really couldn't care less. I mean, I'm making up these numbers, but that's usually how it works. You've got some very involved, some that just are going to do whatever the commissioner and these other presidents want, say is right.
And it's fair to point out all of these people these university presidents have spent the majority of their life in academia.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They're not necessarily business people. There is a business to running a university, but it's different than market, the fair value markets business.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense that they would want to put their trust in someone who they hired to do this.
Correct. I mean, in the academia world, they're under the, and I'm going to broad brush this, but they're under the can't we all just get along type of thing. Kumbaya, right? Like they are business minded people, but not to the level of sitting in negotiation with an ESPN
Absolutely.
to hammer out a number, right?
So they're not. Yes, they're especially the public schools.
Right.
Public schools may, depending on the laws and rules in their state, they may never have to negotiate things.
True. Right. Yeah. It's all done for them. Yeah. So let's get into. So that was kind of. I'll be very careful to use the word facts because it's rumors. There's some speculation there. Some of it did come directly from president. Some of that I just said came from Randall of Utah. Some of it came from the Washington president. I think everything that I just said is likely to be fairly factually accurate.
It's all quotes and it's reporting. It's
reporting.
Not opinion and conjecture.
Correct.
It's quotes and reporting.
So let's get into my opinions.
Okay.
And then I'm going to ask you for your opinions.
All right.
So clearly the Pac-12, and by the Pac-12 right now, I mean the presidents of the Pac-12, who are the board members of the Pac-12, chose to play hardball with this, and they lost big time.
Yeah.
To the point that there's a Pac-2 now.
Yeah, right.
Now, some of them, again, we've talked about this, some of them are off to maybe greener pastures, right? How much money are they getting with the Big Ten now or the Big 12 or wherever they're going? But at the time, I don't think the end game was let's blow up the Pac-12 so we can all go to these other conferences. No. They chose to play hardball, and they lost. Yeah. Nothing happened for them. There's two sides to this story. And as I said early on, this is not me defending the commissioner at all. But I will say that is absolutely the easy out. Oh, the commissioner did it. He screwed this up. He does take, and we've talked about this before, and I know we've gotten some comments that didn't like what I'm about to say here, but he should be taking his orders from the board.
Sure.
Now, if he's not, I would say that's an issue that the board isn't doing their job.
Right.
So, a lot of this to me points back to board members. Right or wrong, I'm sure there's plenty of excuses, but if he wasn't doing what the majority of the board wanted him to be doing, even with this, he kept it under lock and key and he only let 4 people. If they wanted to know, they could have known. They're the board of the Pac-12. Right. So that's a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, in my opinion. While it may be true, they could have found out. Clearly, I think there was some lack of attention to detail here, lack of attention to their responsibility here, and eventually led to what I would call some seriously massive backstabbing amongst the members.
Yeah, there was dysfunction, obviously.
Complete dysfunction. And again, is that because they just didn't take the responsibility? Did they just figure it would work its way out? I don't know why that is, but clearly that's what happened. The other thing I'll just say is the presidents, again, I'm not trying to hold Commissioner K not a part of this, but the presidents chose not to accept a deal with ESPN. The presidents chose that they wanted to go to market, to which the market crashed, and then there was no market, or a market that they certainly wouldn't appreciate the valuations for. The presidents chose to take the aggressive valuation approach, the $50 million of it. And I'm not, as again, being in negotiations, I get it. You're going to be aggressive.
Yeah.
But it can backfire on you if you do that. And that's exactly what happened here. If they truly wanted more clarity, as I just said, they absolutely could have pushed that issue and they could have gotten more clarity. They're the board members. Leadership here on all fronts, the commissioner and the presidents, failed. Complete failure of leadership here. Now, the Pac-2, and that's where we're at. The Pac-2 has to try and salvage whatever they can from a decimated conference. I mean, it's up to if they're able to, and I really have hesitation on if they can even do this, but clearly they're going to try to do this. It's up to them. So
they're trying to make, there's an old phrase, they're trying to make chicken salad out of chicken shit.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
I don't like that saying. So I'm done. I mean, I kind of went over this, but I know there's a couple things that you want to kind of, I want you to have some time to give your thoughts on all of that, anything that you haven't been able to yet. And also, I want to get to the second part of what this update was for. And that's really, what do you think the Pac-2's chances are of qualifying for the college football playoffs for 24 and 25? What are those chances for them?
Okay. So I want to address the Pac-12, Pac-10 media deal stuff first.
Yes.
So one thing is, I think there's two different commissioners that from the Pac-12 that get a lot of hate. Commissioner K right now, he's the one that was supposed to bring this home. There was a previous commissioner to this that there's a lot of evidence from what we looked at with the Comcast, the debt that they had, which I don't remember if we talked about this on another episode, but I found some reporting that showed statements, not even reporting, actual statements from the court hearings that the previous commissioner knew was notified by an internal auditor that they had that debt, that they had inflated their numbers to Comcast and gotten payments that were too high. And that commissioner basically told the internal audit team, no one's going to find it. We're not worried about it. which you know, that's probably the last thing you should be telling
you
to
don't
an
want
auditor,
to be doing that.
to your internal auditor, because at some point someone's going to find it. So there's been a long history of, a decade or more of mismanagement, and we've talked about stuff that happened with the Pac-12 network, all of that stuff. Decade or more of mismanagement at the top of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Now, so some of that on the previous commissioner, some of that hate on there probably has bled into the newer commissioner, the current commissioner, Commissioner K. And who really knows? There's always blame shifting at the end, pointing fingers and all that. So we may never know exactly who holds all the blame, but like you said, at the upper echelons of the conference, the university presidents, the commissioner's office, all of that, major blame to go around.
Yep.
Now, I will say, Commissioner K, throughout this process, and all that stuff is really good and interesting stuff about the role of the presidents.
Yeah.
Now, I will say he was strongly and aggressively pushing that the streaming media partner, Amazon or Apple, they were looking at both of those at different times. And so that was something where, which the purported deal with Apple that they talked about, honestly, might be the wave of the future. And so maybe he was just a little too far ahead of his time, and maybe he was promising, and the presidents maybe trusted him that he could deliver that, and he wasn't able to deliver what they wanted for the money. So there's probably plenty of blame to go around.
Well, and that's a form of leadership too. I mean, to knock him here a little bit, I guess, and I should, to be fair. If he was giving promises of what that might look like and unable to deliver on that, and I, again, don't have facts to say that is the case, but you're right that was one of his, that's what he was trying to get to.
Yeah.
And if the failure on that, I don't think that would be the president's necessarily. If they put the trust in him to say, go get it. If you can get that for us, this is the new wave of doing things. We'll be on the forefront of it. And then he failed along with this, this sports media advisors, who I'm sure he was working with on all of this consulting firm, then absolutely the blame is to be held mostly at that level, 100%.
And it's hard to tell.
We don't know.
Where that percentage went, and it's hard to assign a percentage of blame.
Yeah.
I want to talk about valuation real quick.
Yeah.
So, they had, you mentioned, I think it was Utah president, had a professor, an economics professor, do evaluation. So here's the thing. So I don't work in higher education, but I work adjacent to higher education. I'm in that world all the time. And there's this kind of funny joke going around. They say people who can do things do it. People who can't do those things, they teach it, or they become a professor and they live in academia because they. So here's my problem with that. Now I don't have a master's or a doctorate in economics or anything like that.
Sure.
But I do have a degree in business, and I understand, valuations are estimates. Okay, so here's the thing. If you had a large, fully functioning market, you probably could do a pretty good valuation. Problem with this valuation, we've talked about this so many times, is this market, there's only 5 or 6 customers right now. So if there's 2 products, we'll call the Big Ten and the SEC a product. There's 2 products that are clearly above everyone else. They're superior to everyone else as far as, they're in many, many different areas. Yeah. And those 2 products are getting most of the value. And there is a specific finite amount of money that these media partners, the customers, have. And if they're willing to pay all of that extra money for the Big Ten, the problem is it sounds like that professor assumed, well, if the Big Ten's getting this, you should be able to get 60% of that.
Correct.
But the problem is it's such a small you talk about economies of scale, and I
Yeah.
don't want to get into all that because our economics professors will be in the comments telling me that I didn't explain economy of scale.
Yes, you got to be careful.
Yes,
I'll say to some of our viewers, they know what they're talking
Yes,
about.
exactly.
One little flub up, we get told about it, which I appreciate. Keep doing it.
Yes.
Keep doing it. We're not perfect.
But in this case, I don't know if it was the smartest thing to do to go to just an economics professor for evaluation.
Yeah.
I think, and so the Big Ten, they hired a TV executive. Other conferences have hired TV executives to come in because they know the lingo, they know the talk, they know how much money ESPN has to spend, they know how much Fox has to spend.
Right.
So if Fox has $100 million to spend and they're giving $65 million of that to the Big Ten, they're not going to be able to give $40 million or $50 million to the Pac-12. So, anyways, I think that that valuation, obviously they were wrong the whole time on their valuations.
Right. Yes.
They went aggressive.
Yeah.
It wasn't the smart thing to do.
And they over-evaluated themselves.
Right. Yeah.
From both the original counter offer and the actual valuations. Like they just overestimated everything, and it burned.
It burned them. So that's my kind of thoughts on that. Now, as far as your other question, you mentioned, what's the likelihood, what's the chances of a Pac-12 being able to possibly get in the college football playoff the next 2 years?
And I bring this up because we did have a comment a few episodes ago that that chastised us. And this isn't the reason we're doing this. I did want to have an update on this, but I did want to bring it up. We were chastised for being naive enough to think that a two-team division, a two-team conference could have some sort of champion making the college football playoffs. So I think we're due to answer that person's comments, but I also want to actually better solidify because you've done some research. You sent me something that is pretty clear, I think. So I'm anxious to hear what you had to say, but I had to bring up that other comment.
Yeah. So about a week ago, I think about 5 or 6 days ago, as we record tonight, we talked about that Washington State Athletic Advisory Committee, which I think is awesome. You were on that from the very beginning, and it's allowing a bunch of different stakeholders within Washington State to have a voice, to have a say. So there isn't just one guy left holding the bag or girl, woman left holding the bag at the end, and everyone's pointing the blame at them. Right. They're getting inputs from a lot of different people. I love that they're doing this. And so some of the news that came out of their most recent meeting was that the Pac-12, so Oregon State and Washington State, which it kind of seems like the NCAA, from this news, the NCAA is basically just working with Oregon State and Washington State on this, which makes sense because it's going to be them going forward.
Correct, right.
That they've been granted a waiver. They've either been granted a waiver or they've been told they will be given a waiver to operate for 2 years as a conference.
Right.
Okay. So what does that mean exactly? So, they get to operate as a conference if they want to, of 2 teams. I mean, you have a round robin, just keep playing each other. Obviously, they'll have to, do some scheduling partners, bring in some they have a different term, auxiliary members, I think, where I think San Diego State plays soccer in that conference, and affiliate members is the term for it.
That's it. Yep.
So they're going to have to come up with some kind of an agreement like that, which made open. We've talked about this with the Mountain West. Maybe they can do a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West. So the NCAA waiver, where that's really going to affect is all of the non-football sports.
Okay.
So here's the thing: is championships and playoffs in all sports except for football. Basically, in most sports, pretty much every sport, are governed by the NCAA.
Okay.
So we're talking volleyball, we're talking soccer, we're talking wrestling, we're talking everything else is governed by the NCAA. So that's going to have an effect. Now, there are some, apparently there's a requirement that you have to have 6 members. You could be a conference, but in some of those Olympic sports, you have to have 6 members to actually qualify for an automatic bid to like the NCAA tournament.
Right. Okay.
And so the way they can get around that is having what do we call
Affiliate
those?
members.
Affiliate members. And that works. That counts towards their 6. So they're going to be working hard on all those other sports.
Okay.
And I'm sure Washington State and Oregon State are already working on that.
Sure.
Important business to line that up if they want to operate for the next 2 years.
Yep.
Now, there's one sport, the very important sport, that is not governed by the NCAA as far as the playoffs and championship structure, and that is obviously football.
Right.
What we've talked about is for Division I FBS, that is actually governed by the College Football Playoff Committee and their rules. And as we've already said, the rules are the top 6 conference champions will be used the next 2 years as they are in place now, unless they're amended. The top 6 ranked conference champions will get automatic berth into the 12-team playoff. So does that guarantee Oregon State and Washington State a spot? No, it doesn't. But it does guarantee that they, as the rules are now, and if they're allowed to operate as a conference, that they, if they were one of those top 6, if they were ranked in the top 25, whoever was the conference champion, and they were in the top 6 of all conference champions, they would qualify, as the rules are now, they would qualify for a college football playoff spot. That's just what it is. I don't know about naive and not naive and all that stuff. People like to throw around those terms, but there are contracts, there are things, ways that are things set up. We've looked into that. We've looked at the reporting, looked at the quotes from the people on the committee, who a lot of them wanted to change it, but there was one person that said, and it was the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, said, no, I'm not changing it, just so that they can exclude, because then they can use that to exclude the rest of us.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't in their interest. So as of now, and it requires unanimous consent, they're not changing it. So as they sit right now, Oregon State and Washington State, I believe, well, Washington State just fell out of the rankings for this year.
Yes, they did.
Oregon State, who lost to Washington State, is still ranked.
Yes.
So as they stand right now, if we were in a 12-team playoff under those rules right now, you could definitely see a scenario where one of those 2 teams would get a college football playoff berth. I think it's a definite possibility. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed, but they definitely have a shot, so it makes a lot of sense for them to continue to try and do this next 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
It's a way they can recoup some of this revenue. They are losing. They are being harmed by everyone else leaving. So I totally see why they want to fight and try and maintain their existence as a 2-team, if even just for these 2 years, to get some of that possible revenue.
Absolutely. And, I just got to say, Dems de facts.
You're right. Yeah.
Dems de facts. And I'm going to pat you on the back a little bit, because we saw this coming.
Absolutely.
And we reported that this was going to be the case. And there were 2 main things in the past that you have said. One was the bylaws of the ACC. You were very clear, and I think that's where that naive comment came from. But you were very clear what the bylaws said, and that this could happen. Now you've got, clearly a firm answer as to, yes, you 100%, at least in the football,
of the CFP,
in the football,
college football playoff.
You absolutely can do this, whether it's through with the bylaws, with the CFP, all of that. It can happen. The other thing you mentioned was that 2 weeks ago, I believe it was the Washington State AD went and spoke
to the Division I Council.
Division I Council. Again, just, giving him an update, or giving them an update, asking for some help, if you will, or at least some being understanding to the situation.
Absolutely.
Again, this has all been playing into the same thing that we have seen here. And unless you're putting your head in the ground like an ostrich and you just want to believe what you believe, that's fine. You have every right to do that. But we're trying to gather information from different sources in different areas, look at what's actually going on. We don't have a horse in this race, as we've said before, but it's very interesting. And I'll give you props here, because I think when you look at those 2 things that you've talked about before, we saw this coming almost to 100% the way it has ended up right now. So well done.
And thank you. And I think sometimes people focus on the headlines, the media, the big media. They, they're going to focus on those things. They're in big business of sports media, making a lot of money. So they're going to focus on the sensational headlines, the things that are going to get clicks, whatever. And you and I have tried to take that approach. We're just 2 guys having fun doing a YouTube channel. And so we've dug into this. We've looked at bylaws. We've looked at reports from committee members, from schools. This is the facts. This is what's going on. This is what's in writing. This is what's in contracts. We'll see how it goes, because things can change.
Absolutely.
Bylaws can be changed. Contracts can be changed. All of that. But that's where we are right now.
And the interesting thing with that, if they do want to move forward with that PAC-12, is how do they create a schedule? I'm sure they can, but what teams are they really going to be playing, knowing that a lot of these out of conference games for all these teams, they're already locked up for these 2 years for the most part,
especially the bigger programs.
Programs. So if you're talking about these schools wanting to compete and get in a CFP spot, they've got to play bigger schools so they can be ranked, so they can be, you know what I mean? So it's definitely, I'm not saying it can't happen, but there's a lot that has to occur in order for it to happen.
There is, and honestly, we haven't seen, and we'll see what comes out on that, because those are good points. Though I'm sure there'll be reporting, there'll be more quotes. I have kind of some trust and faith that they're already working on those
I'm
things.
Sure they are. Yes.
And you mentioned the AD going to talk to the NCAA Division I council or committee. He and the Washington State and Oregon State have been great on framing all of this as, not what's good for our university, but what's good for our student athletes.
Yes.
Giving them an opportunity, all the student athletes in all the sports, including football, giving them an opportunity to compete, to have their scholarship, to compete, to stay on the team, to not have to leave, not have to shut down teams, to have a chance to go for a championship. And all of those things, Washington State and Oregon State have done a great job at framing that to the powers that be. And at a time where the NCAA, everybody from the Supreme Court to every talking head to every normal person is questioning, why do we even need the NCAA?
Right.
And so at this point, are they going to want to come down and basically just say, no, Washington State and Oregon State student athletes, you're not allowed to compete for a championship. You're not allowed to do any of this because all these other programs left you for more money. I think it's very smart strategy by Washington State and Oregon State to frame it. It's smart and it's the right thing to do.
Yep. Hey, I just want to wrap up by saying, I'm sure we have some new viewers here. I'm sure we have some repeat viewers here. We're actually getting some decent number of subscribers now. We really appreciate that. We get usually about 1,000+ views on our expansion videos, so we love that people are enjoying this. But for those that haven't seen us before, I do want to maybe quickly just point out that where Steve and I are at on this, and this being Washington State and Oregon State. And where do we really think they're going to end up? There's a lot of rumors out there. There's been reporting about Big 12 stuff. There's been reporting about AAC stuff. We don't see that as being very realistic at all. We just recently did one about the Big 12. If you want to, I'm not getting into that detail, but you can go back and look at that if you're interested. But where Steve and I think we're still consistent with this, but please speak up if I'm wrong. I think in the short term, we're seeing the true path to having a PAC-12 for the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
We think that's very much something that could happen. I'm not sure if this is going to be a 50-50 type of thing, but I think that's very realistic. I think the other very realistic thing, we think, is either joining or merging with the Mountain West. Somehow that Oregon State and Washington State are with the Mountain West team. So I think that's maybe a little bit of a longer term if they can figure out some of this short-term stuff. Again, for the 24 and 25 year, Steve just laid out how it's legally, or not legally, but how it can be done in terms of college football playoffs. Yeah. And if they can figure it out from all kinds of different reasons, scheduling and all that kind of stuff, it probably makes sense for them to do it. Yeah. And just ride that out for 2 years. But I think the long game here is likely some sort of merger with or joining of the Mountain West for these two schools. I think that's kind of where we've been out for about a month now. I have seen nothing to change my mind on that. You have opened my eyes to this 2 year thing. I was a little negative on that in the beginning. The more reporting we do on this, the more I think that is actually probably, if I were to handicap this for 24 and 25, I'd have the most likely scenario being a PAC-12, and then 26 and beyond being I'm going to just say a merger with the Mountain West. I think that's where I'm at right now on this.
I think I'm pretty much with you. Definitely, I think we agree on the short-term stuff. Long term, I definitely see that as the most likely possibility. I do think that those two may still make a last-ditch effort to get into one of the other Power 5 programs or Power 4 programs or conferences. I mean, it's possible, but I just don't see a fit.
Yeah.
If the Big 12 wanted them, they would have already brought them in.
Absolutely.
The ACC, when they're adding these other teams. So we'll see how that goes. But so I'm mostly in agreement with you that I think the long term, it ends up as some kind of a partnership, merger, something with the Mountain West.
Yeah, and a lot can happen in 2 years.
Yes.
I mean, look at what happened in the past year.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Again, as we sit today, that's where I'm at. Yeah. But I agree with you. 2 years from now, there could be more, maybe the Big 12's looking at bringing them in much more then than they are now. And so who knows? But as we sit here today, I think that's where we're at. Yeah. So, hey, we thank you for tuning in. If you have comments on any of this, please let us know. We usually get some really decent comments on this. We really appreciate them. We try to respond to most of them. get a little back and forth going if we need to. If you like what we put out here, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give us a like on this episode. We usually try to do expansion videos once a week. I think it's been a little bit longer now, just didn't have much to do. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out here with the hearing here very, very soon. So I think we're going to be doing a lot of these shortly.
Totally agree. And I think we may have another ACC Big Ten one coming up in the next couple weeks. I
Oh,
think there's
fantastic.
All
All right.
Some changes, some movements. We'll see.
Okay, awesome. So, hey, things are going good. We may be doing one on the Michigan scandal as well. I know Steve is kind of keeping his ear on that, kind of see what comes out here in the next few days. So we may be doing an update specific to the scandal that is currently surrounding the Michigan football team. So with that, hey, we thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.